to the people listening, if you're imagining that life is harder for you because of X, Y, or Z, it's that same way for anybody who is like you. And just saying that you have a difficulty does not change your situation. If you want your situation changed, it's going to be you changing it.
So more than ever, we're finding that people are leaving the 9-to-5, the corporate work, because they want to have control over their future in an unknown world that we're experiencing right now. I haven't experienced that, not like others, because I've been in entrepreneurship since I was a kid, but some others have, and I've invited Lamar Woods. I know that someone listening today is either there or they've considered it. I can't wait for you to listen in. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is A Call to Leadership. Lamar Woods, my friend, so good to have you on this episode of A Call to Leadership. I've been so excited for us to spend some time together. You as a not only a new entrepreneur, but as somebody who, as we spoke before we started recording, somebody who I believe we share in a plight, if you will.
For sure.
And so to start unpacking that journey for our listeners, I think it will be a blessing. And to just talk through really some of the tribulations and the trials that we face.
Plenty of those.
And how we continue to walk through and adapt and overcome. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of relevance to that. So let's start with sharing a little bit about your background. Okay. Tell me about your family life growing up. What was that like?
Family life growing up, there was a lot of moving when I was younger. My mom and dad, they met in Oklahoma. All my family's from Oklahoma City to be exact. And so we've got a bit of a half country city type of family. And when I was very young, my dad started to move around a lot. He realized really early that he liked to move to new spots and meet new people and things of that nature. So before I could even, get a birth certificate, really, we were moving to Texas. And then we ended up moving back and forth between there and Oklahoma before landing in Vegas when I was in the second grade, somewhere around there. And then landed in St. Louis in the fifth grade. So what it was like for me was I was always needing to meet new people. I was always sort of the new kid. I was always, just a newer person in the space. And so that's kind of what it was like growing up for me. My mom, she was always very loving, very affectionate, if you ask my brother and sister, I was the favorite. I am the baby, full disclosure.
Do you think you were the favorite?
I think I was. I'm not going to lie. I think I was. But here's a twist that I don't think most people put on it is I felt I deserved some favoritism.
Okay, come on.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and say it. So when there's a difference between giving favor to people who don't exactly deserve it, and there's a different thing altogether to giving favor to people who work for theirs. Right. And so you're thinking, you're just a kid. How could you have earned anything over your older siblings? I think that we all grew up with a different situation. We had moms we all have the same mom, but we all had moms that were different ages and at different stages in their life. Yeah. Right. True. That shapes who you are in your life in a lot of different ways that I don't feel like many people talk about. But the truth of the fact is that if you're in the house with the same mom at the same time, there's only a certain amount of actions that you're going to sort of use to make your mom give you affection. And I feel like I pulled all the right levers to make it above the rest in this competition. I love you too, brother and sis, Corian and Kanikwa. I love you for sure. But I feel like I pulled those levers. I was very diligent about the grades. I was very diligent about doing whatever mom said. And even though we would get into trouble, for not cleaning this or that, I would always make sure that I found some way to come back. So I would come back with a good report card after we got in trouble. We got a spanking. I make sure that I had my T's crossed. And so whenever my brother and sister come to me and talk about how I was the favorite, I'm like, okay, I'll take that. But at the same time, I put in a lot more work.
You earned it. So a little bit like Joseph, I guess, in some ways, right? Because Joseph was putting in the work, right? Maybe in a different kind of work, but he was putting in the kind of work that mom and dad were like, okay, we like this, right? And so of course was there a jealousy like Joseph's? Now
I would have to say there was a little something. Yeah, there was some jealousy in there a little bit.
But the older siblings didn't sell you into slavery, so.
But they didn't sell me to slavery, so they're leagues and bounds greater than his siblings were, than his brothers were, for sure. But yeah, I think that there's going to be that dynamic in almost every family. Right. As a person who's now growing up and seeing, okay, well, when I have a kid, I'm going to want to treat them X, Y, and Z way. I'm realizing that it's not exactly as simple to say, I'm just going to love all of them equally. It might just be natural for people to have preference. Yeah. And it also might be natural to skew younger as the favorite, just because it's having a child itself is a major part of your life. And for that to happen recently is also a lot. So I just want to tie the bow on that by saying, yes, I feel like I worked for it, but I feel like at the same time, people need some grace in the sense that it is natural to have a favorite. You don't, if there are two pots of coffee on your desk, you're only going to reach for one. And it's just automatic. Yeah. If there's two screens on your table, you're going to look at one first.
Yeah. And perhaps a favorite in different areas too, if you think about that. Like maybe one child is more ambitious and one child is more affectionate and one child, different sort of strengths each child has. And so I look at that with ours is I have one child that's extremely logical and on the reason side. Of course, that speaks to my, love for logic and reason, but I have one in the house who is extremely empathetic and loving and outgoing, and of course that speaks to my extroverted side. So different areas I think that you can really appreciate and love on them in a certain way. And I wonder how much that shapes or has shaped your journey in life, because you being the kind of person that was shaped around, of course, being the youngest. And, you think about also parents, by the time they get to however many children, in your case, you have
it was three,
right?
So I'm the last of three.
Yeah. So I was the firstborn, and all the trial and error, right, on the firstborn, and then by the time you get to the third, you got it all worked out, right? And so even with our pets, we've got we're working on several pets down the line, dogs, and the first one is like you're trying to figure it out, right? The second and the third, you're like, I got this, the whole potty training and then all this stuff. And I think the kids, it's similar. So as a firstborn, I was, of course, on my own a lot with stuff because I was much more independent. I was in trouble more and things like that. And my sister, who's the youngest, she had it all good. Yep. She wasn't having to deal with all that stuff. Mom's, by that time, there was 11 years between my sister. So like you said, different stage of life. And older.
Same situation with me and my older brother. He's about 11 years older than
me. So yeah, totally. So now, tell me about how you grew up as far as your worldview on what you could accomplish in life, especially being African American, right? I mean, what was your home context like as far as how you viewed the world around you?
I would say that when I was younger, I grew, and I could say that there was some luck in there. There's definitely some luck in this. I grew this mindset that I was able to do whatever it was that I wanted to do. I grew this mindset that it was possible. I could make it possible, whatever it was that I wanted. So of course, I grew that just out of small things that would happen. Like I found out, I could work a little bit harder on a test, and then I could use that to get, a pet from my mom when I was in about the 4th grade, somewhere around there. I walked into this guy's house and he had this huge green iguana, and I was big into animals. I read tons about animals. I was like, I don't know, if there was a library full of animal books, I'm sure that I would have went to that place and taken every book out of it. So one day I recognized that, I could say, hey mom, I want that. And she would say, no, of course you can't. And I've realized there's a caveat to most of those no you can'ts. And so what I did was I would work hard and I got the grades required and I would get that thing that I wanted, whether it be the pet, the PlayStation, or whatever. And those instances shaped my worldview in such a way that it made me believe that I could get what I wanted, even if it seems like a no. I could get what I wanted by doing some sort of extra work that the person next to me is not going to do. Uh-huh. And I would probably say if there's one thing that shaped my sort of worldview the most, it would be experiences like that. And, to my brother and sister's credit, it might not have been that way when they were younger. My older brother, my mom was really young when she had him. So she might not have had the resources to give him whatever he asked for, even if he followed through. And the same situation to some extent might have been able to have been said about my sister. So there's an amount of luck and an amount of drive and a lot of success, and just about all success. There's some amount of luck, some amount of drive. You just have to get those two in the right proportions. You have to have them both in order to make it.
Interesting.
Yeah,
it's true. Yeah. So I look at luck as what I call context conversion. So when contexts converge to the right symmetry, if you will. And then you talk about drive, which is, okay, these contexts have converged in such a way to where I can then utilize my own drive, my own motivation to capitalize or to make the best use of this context conversion, i.e. luck. Then I can then bend systems, if you will. Some would say, change reality. Some would say master your context. I think that may be a good way to look at it rather than surrender to your context. And I think that's a great way you frame it. I think that when I'm hearing you is I'm saying that I'm hearing you say, I did not surrender to my context, but I chose to master them. And I think that's an important distinction because I come from a first generation community. So my parents were immigrant Palestinians. And so I grew up with this narrative of, my dad worked in a grocery store, then he was locked up, and, we had these small businesses, and I grew up with the mindset of, well, maybe this is the mindset of the immigrant mindset in some ways is just have your little store and serve that demographic or wherever you're at. And I remember having a buddy who told me one day I was in the back of my paging and cell phone business. It was way back in the 90s. So cell phones are big brick phones. If you've seen them in a museum. So he says, Nate, you could do better. And a little bit different than your worldview, change, if you will, or how you saw it. I was like, I could do better. And there's nothing wrong with that lifestyle if that's what you choose and that's the vision for your life. But I thought, well, shoot, I could do better. And then I started broadening my horizons on what was possible. And so did you have external sources like that as well? And I was always ambitious, and it sounds like you've been driven and ambitious. I mean, where was Dad in this scenario of your pushing your boundaries?
I would say that my dad, he helped me push boundaries, but only to an extent. It was all through imitation. My dad, he was not a business owner. He was just a manager he was a manager of janitorial services. And so when he moved around a lot, he essentially got to the point to where he wasn't exactly cleaning the floors, but he made sure that the floors were cleaned no matter who had to get them done. And so I would see him come in and out of the house. He'd have his suits on. He's like the most dressed guy in the most dressed, best dressed janitor I've ever seen. And so I would see him come in, clean, leave work early, come back a little late. And those things rubbed off on me. Where it comes to, what sort of ways did he sculpt that or shape me? I wouldn't say that I had that. And so I'm luckier than some in the fact that I had a dad to see, and I was able to see how he made his ends meet. And on the other end, I didn't quite have that oversight or someone looking at me externally and saying, you can do better. The most he, did for me in that regard was saying, you should be in sports. And I want you to go in sports. And this is in like 8th grade. So beyond that, there was really not much more. And he would just say, oh, well, I like what you're doing there. And that's as far as it really went. So
you saw his discipline, you saw his determination, that he had an attitude of excellence, it sounds like, in his work. And it's interesting you even bring up janitorial, because I tell my son, I don't care if you do janitorial work or if you're a neurosurgeon. I don't really see a higher value in either of those professions. The value that I see in any profession is that you do it to the best of your ability, and it's your purpose.
Yeah.
Because we need people in all walks of life. And so we don't need society to put an individual value or devalue any position whatsoever. The guy that picks up my trash every week, I need that person. I'm so thankful for that person. I don't look down on that person whatsoever. That's an essential role. And I'm so thankful that that individual has found purpose in that. I think it's important to make that distinction.
It is. Everybody's important.
Yeah.
Yeah. If we had a million doctors and no one to pick up the trash, we would probably all be sick anyway.
Indeed.
So it's like everybody has a part to play, and I like the way you said that there's no really more important person than the other, because the only situation in which that is true is back before separation of work. When everybody was making their own butter, hunting their own fish, that's when one person could be more important than the other, because they've got, they're bringing in more production. But as it is today, there's no way for you to get groceries by farming them yourself. It's just not the best use of your time. So you outsource that to groceries. You outsource your trash to the trash guys. There's no such thing as one person being more important, because without any of these single things, society itself sort of collapses.
Yeah, I agree. I love when we met how inquisitive you were when we first met. And I think I'd spoken at your church on, of all things, taxes, right? And you came up to me afterwards and asked that we grab a lunch or have a meeting because you wanted to learn. And not only in my academic research or as a teacher, but in life in general, I've found that people who are inquisitive, people who are interested in learning on a deep level, seem to achieve and excel. I mean, have you always been a curious person?
I would say so. Yeah. Actually, I would say that I've always been curious. When I was younger, I was very into puzzles and really didn't want to do anything if it wasn't interesting. And by interesting, I mean complex enough to hold my interest. Yeah, for sure. When I was younger, it used to be all about finding a good challenge or a good puzzle. Then as I grew older, video games and cards and all of those things start to come in. But even at that point, I was looking for a challenge or a way to grow at the same time. So, when I got done, Beyblading with the kids, I would be trying to figure out, okay, well, what book is it going to be that's going to move me to the next step? And why should I not hang out with them on Thursday and instead, hang out at the house? And it was just really this long sort of plan of being successful one day. And I think that the curiosity came out of this. I didn't know what success was at the time.
Interesting.
The definition for success has actually changed for me multiple times, but I've always wanted it. And I think that curiosity first just came out of I just didn't want to do anything unless I was interested. And curiosity was my way of keeping me interested in life itself. If there was nothing for me to learn and I wasn't curious, then I just didn't see any point in going to class or anything like that. So I always found ways to stay curious. But once I got a little bit older, I stayed curious because I wanted to figure out what success was. And I knew that I had no idea how to get there.
Interesting. So when you see someone, like, let's just use it as an example. You see someone speaking and it draws you somehow or another. Well, what's going on in your mind? I think people need to know maybe a step-by-step process, because there may be inhibitions that are keeping them from moving forward. There may be reasons they think, oh, that person wouldn't want to talk to me or have a coffee with me. Or maybe there's other things going on. What's going on in your mind?
What's going on in my mind? Let's say that, like when you came in and did a talk at the church, what was going through my mind was, where is this person? Is this person further along or behind me in terms of my route to success? What stage of life are they in? If it turns out they're in front of me, then I'm trying to break apart who this person is. I want to know the things like, where did you go to school? How big was your family? What did your parents do? I want to know these things, because when I see all these separate pieces, I want to align. I want to figure out what part of their life is similar to mine, and what parts of their life should I be trying to bring into mine so that I can align myself for greater success later. So I'm always looking for that next something that's going to get me closer to the success.
I love that.
That's exactly what I felt when I saw you. I said, I just met this man today. I haven't even gotten a chance to shake his hand yet, but I will shake his hand, and I will figure out what are those pieces that where are those pieces in his life that I can add to mine.
And interestingly, I think if I remember correctly, I know it's been several years, our initial conversation was on books. I think we were talking about how to read a book with efficiency and effectiveness, because I may have mentioned that at the time I was working on my PhD, and I was talking about how many books I had to read during the program. I mean, endless books. And of course you have to learn how to read for efficiency. And you were interested in that process.
Yes.
Because you wanted to be able to also be able to mass consume effectively. And I think I might have emailed you my format for that. And so I love your tenacity, and I love how you've systematized this process in your mind, because you're performing an analysis. This isn't like passive, like I'm just going to sit here and absorb what I think might be okay, or just for entertainment purposes. You have a very distinct purpose with your time to maximize its value with these relationships and this analysis that you're performing. And I think probably I would guess that after a while it becomes intuitive, and that you're not like having to be intentional about it, but it's just happening.
It's already a habit. Yep. I've already seen enough people who are further along in that success journey than me. And so just by the fact of what I've already done, I come to everybody the same way. You are doing something that's amazing. At my level, I'd love to pick up on it. Exactly, who are you? What do you do? And how did you get here? And I let that conversation bubble into the further conversations that will lead themselves to me finding those pieces and being able to add them to my life.
How do those conversations usually go? Do people say, look, man, I don't have time for you? Or are people usually open?
I think that people are mostly open.
Yeah.
People are mostly open. It's the people who aren't open are the people who just don't want to accept you quite yet. There are always people who are at a certain altitude in business or in life, and they just do not have the time. If I wanted to speak to Obama about how he became as successful as he is, he'd say, I'm sorry, I don't have time. I can't do that. So, I think that it's possible for me to have that conversation with Obama. I just need to reach a certain altitude before I can have that conversation.
Right.
And I understand that if there's a person that I come across and they don't want to have the conversation, they don't want to sit down with me, they probably are at a different altitude. If I've identified them as someone who I want to talk to and they don't want to chat, they're at an altitude where they can't even accept the newness of me. Like they can't have a good back and forth with someone with this level of experience or altitude. And so I just go about it, and I just be bold, and I try. And the worst that you're going to get is a no. Nobody's going to say no, and I hate you, and you'll never work in this town again. Right. People are always, okay, thank you, I appreciate it, but no, I don't have time. And so I go ahead, I go out there and I shoot the shot. I try and connect with key players. And one day there's going to be something that a key player says that is just going to snap for me, and it's going to take me an extra leg up. And that's just what I'm looking for in every single one of these conversations. Every time I meet with you, every time I meet with someone who's, got more experience, I'm looking for, what is that thing that I'm going to need? Is that going to come out today? Is it going to come out the next meeting? I don't know. I'm going to continue the relationship.
And for those of us who are on the other side of it, who are in a sense mentoring or sharing our experience, at least I found that I'm looking for that response. So it actually invigorates that conversation. So if I tell you something that resonates with you along your journey, providing more resources, knowledge, intellect, experience, wisdom, and I see your reaction that, wow, okay, this is impactful to me. I'm absorbing this and I'm going to use it. It actually is a benefit to me because I know that I've imparted something and I've given something that will eventually pay dividends through someone else. And so I think it's important to know that, because when first of all, I love that you use the word picture, taking the shot. Take the shot, right? The old saying, right? You miss 100% of the shots you don't take, right? So I spent a lot of time on the basketball court by myself, usually when I was younger, because we didn't have much money. We had enough money for a basketball, which I think we got at the flea market or something like that, right? So I just take shot after shot after shot after shot right there at the free throw line. And I just keep taking them and taking them. Eventually I started making more and more and more because I got better and better at taking the shot. Then I started taking 3-pointers. And then I took more and more and more. And, we lived in a part of town where there was a lot of basketball games going on. I was only 5'8", shorter guy. Of course, people look at me and they say, okay, this kid, I don't know if he could hoop or not, but, and I would just D up against somebody that was usually taller.
Yep.
My fingers, you can't see them in this episode, but I don't have huge hands, but they're just big enough to where even that little 1/4 inch extra, people, they wouldn't size it right. So I just get that tip. And then I get the ball and I'd hit my 3-pointer or I'd hit my shot. And so the point is that I'm making is that this analogy of taking the shot, I mean, you're taking shots in practice, but you're also taking shots when it's game time.
Yep.
Because all of everything that you're learning from taking those shots, right, is going to pay itself off when you hit prime time.
That's right.
And so you're walking through life. So tell me about high school. High school, were you an average student? Were you a above average student?
I would say that I was an average student.
Average student.
I had come out of middle school and had always been smart. Had always been gifted in terms of how well I do on tests. As I transitioned into high school, I started to, and this is a good thing for people to hear. I started to become discouraged on my route. Like for a long time I had been staying away from parties, focusing on school. Nothing was more important than just reaching this next level. And for success in my eyes, I guess at that point, getting into college was that next level of success, was successful to me. But I began to get discouraged when I got into high school because I would see the people around me who were smart. They didn't exactly look like they had the best life ever. And so I would see kids who weren't always as smart, but maybe they were on the basketball team. And so they had friends and they had girls, or maybe there was a guy who was into weightlifting or another guy who had a nice car, even though he was still in high school. I felt like there were so many ways. That's when I got into high school, that's when life became confusing. I couldn't just have a single track and go down it. There was so many other people who were doing well. And I felt like the smart kids were not exactly the king, the cream of the crop when it came to high school. And so I started to lax on my schooling a bit and started to focus on being, I guess, more of a well-rounded type of person. So I would get into sports and I would try to meet people and try and talk more. And
so was it you were trying to be cool more?
It was. That's exactly what it was.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it was really, I just wanted to, I felt like I was tired of being the smart nerd. I wanted to still be smart, but I didn't care about it as much. I wanted a good life.
Right. Because you're a smart guy. I mean, it's clear, you know, people who have, your cognition is strong, and I call it a microprocessor. You got a fast microprocessor. You pick up quickly, you're articulate, you're very observant. There's a lot of factors about your cognition that are exceptional, right?
Thank you.
And you're welcome. And I think that this is a plus and a minus, right? So, certainly a different family context.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was bipolar, and so had her first nervous breakdown when I was 14. My parents had divorced when I was 5. My father lived in another state. So high school for me was a train wreck, right? It was just like, it was all kinds of problems. My mom moved back overseas, and I went to live with my dad in Chicago. That was a nightmare because my dad, inherited a 15-year-old teenager who had a big chip on his shoulder, and God bless him. I mean, he did the best he could. He had no idea what he was getting his hands on, but total train wreck. Like you, strong cognition, things like that. But I was like, I'm just going to do the bare minimum. I'm just going to have fun with my friends, and then I'm just going to get through.
Yep.
Then you get through high school.
Got through high school, focused on sports at a certain point. Like I said, I felt like the people who were in sports had a bit more of that better life. And so I focused a lot more on sports in high school, got out and used sports to get a ROTC scholarship, and went to Mizzou for a year on that ROTC scholarship. And what I realized while I was there was that getting into a nice school was not the definition of success. Like I told you, the definition kept changing on me.
Was that the definition initially?
The initial definition was just make mom happy.
Interesting.
That's what it was. Very young, 5th grade-ish. That's when it's probably all started. I'm like, just make mom happy. And then I saw mom struggle with money. It was get mom some money. Then I started to recognize that, school was important, and it became getting into college. I got to about halfway through high school, and it became obvious to me I was going to go to college. I just didn't see any other reason, any reason why I wouldn't. And so it's like, okay, once I got in, about halfway through college, I recognized that it wasn't even that. It was about getting into a good college, one of the best ones. And even beyond that, I would say probably after college, it became, no, it's a great career. Using your degree for the great career is it. That's the definition of success. And to move forward even a bit further, a few years later, I recognized that having a good job, or what people consider a good job, which I think that a six-figure job is what that was the holy grail for most people that were around me. I got the job, and one day made it to 6 figures, and recognized that I had been misled again. I was incorrect on what the definition was, and then it became successful business owner as that definition. Now I think that this definition is going to stay around for a while. I think that this one's good to stay. But
do you think
who knows?
Do you think that when you say success, was it not fulfilling? Is that how you define success? As having fulfillment, having obviously 6-figure salary, like you said, there's a lot of financial comfort that you can, of course, it's relative, right? On what really, what's real. I mean, if you like flying on a private jet everywhere you go, 6 figures not going to do it, right?
Nothing, right.
But certainly, did you grow up in a modest home environment financially?
Yeah, I would say that it was very modest. My mom grew up on a dirt floor, she calls it. It wasn't actually dirt, but the house that she lived in was so old and so shabby, you could call it, that even after you vacuum the floor, and I get these stories from my aunt and her all the time. Whenever any complaining comes out, they'll say, "Oh, when I remember our dirt floor, you would vacuum the floor, and then somebody would walk across the floor, and dirt prints would be there that's the type of thing she had to go through. They had a hole in the backyard where, with a pot, and that's how they handled business. And so that's where my mom's side comes from. My dad's side, they did a bit better. They had a house where they were, at for a long time, but middle class is really the best it got. And so me being a part of both those households, lower middle class, upper poverty is where I generally was for the majority of the time. And once my parents split, which was in the 6th grade, my parents had a divorce. My dad went back home to Oklahoma and my mom stayed here in St. Louis with us. Once that happened, I started to recognize what my sort of economic class was, and we were in the poverty area, definitely mid upper poverty. I probably say upper poverty, and so yeah, that's really where I started. That's what I grew up in and around. So when I say 6-figure salary was like the holy grail to most people around me, that was literally
you arrived.
I had arrived when I got there, at least in sort of the family's eyes.
And the family's eyes economically. And so we share in that because I grew up in poverty as well. And so the same mindset, go to college. Wow. It's a huge win. Right. Yep. And so like you said, the 6 figures, huge win. All of a sudden you can take care of everybody. No, it's not like that.
Not exactly.
It's not like that. But then, like you said, the arrival is more of it's a plateau in that area. Mm-hmm. Right. So it's more like, okay, well, I achieved this. What's next?
Yes.
Right. What's next? And I love that your attitude is a what's next attitude. Rather than an attitude of, okay, this is good. Now, and don't get me wrong, if that's where you land and that there's contentment there and that's your purpose, then that's fantastic, right?
Yep.
But not for you.
Not for me.
So walking through this, you've got a comfortable salary, and looks like you could probably continue to grow in your career. Mm-hmm. But you're not satisfied.
But I'm not satisfied. I recognize that it wasn't enough when I would look at my coworkers and they would be going on trips with their families. Now, even though we had the same jobs, maybe they were in for, a year or two more than me. Maybe they were, had a slightly better position, but we were all making around the same amount of money, right? I recognized that what I had and the direction I was going wasn't enough for me, because they would be able to take their families. They would go on vacation trips with their families to Florida or wherever. And I thought, well, when's the last time I took a vacation with my family? We had never had a vacation. When I was in the 6th or 7th grade, we went to Branson. And that was the best. That was the vacation experience that I had, other than, going home to see my family, which that's not a vacation either. And so thinking about why I couldn't do that and why other people could, it became apparent to me that other people had more wealth within their families or within their home unit. And that's what made me think, okay, there's got to be more to this than just the job, because we've got the same job and his car looks better than mine and he gets to go on vacations with his mom. I want the vacations too. And when I thought about it, I started to look at different aspects of their lives, and it just turns out that there were varying amounts of wealth in these different families. And I just happened to come from a family that did not have a lot of money, even though I had made it to, top 10% of my family's, in terms of what I was bringing home. I still wasn't able to even scratch the life that these people had who had the exact same job as me. And so I recognized that they had something in their life. Somebody had made more money from a different type of job, or they had more family members in their life who were not in the poverty level. And so therefore they could pull and do these cool things. And so I said, well, I'm not exactly going to wave a wand and have my entire family get 6-figure jobs. That's not going to happen. But I can just decide to earn more. And then through earning more, I will one day be able to take my family on vacations and things of that nature. So that's when I recognized, okay, this job isn't going to get me there, not by itself. I would need a village of people who all are making similar flow in order for my full family's life to change. And so that's when I started to figure out, okay, well, how would I do more? That's when I started to get more interested in entrepreneurship and things of that nature. And another thing I'll share with you is when I got my first job as a software developer, it was for a software consulting company, a lot like mine. And the owner had partnered with 2 restaurateurs and they were working on a restaurant point of sale application. That experience of seeing an entrepreneur actually putting something together, it was life-changing for me. I had never seen it. And I wanted that life, even though his eyes were red, extremely red, and he was tired a lot of days. And I would see his car. His car had more holes in it than the St. Louis streets. He had some nasty looks on his car, but he had a different life. It's not just about him being able to get up and go where he wants when he wants. Yeah, he kind of had that, even though he had a lot of responsibilities. It's just that his life seemed like it was so much better than what I was going for. And I said, okay, well, that's what an entrepreneur kind of looks like. What does a successful entrepreneur looks like, where they've got that, but they also have the wins and the bank accounts that come from doing that for a long time and doing it well. And so that all of this sort of combined into me saying, successful business owner, that's it for me. That's the definition of success. That's what I'm going for. And at that point, it was just trying to figure out how to do it.
How to get there.
Yep.
How to get there. And so the trajectory, is that, each of these milestones is a stepping stone for you, right? So the good grades, pleasing mom, right? To the good grades, to college. Okay. The college, to the career, the 6-figure career.
Yep.
Okay. The 6-figure career now to the entrepreneurship. And that's the next step. I went a little bit of a different route where I dropped out of college to get rich, right? Because I thought, okay, I'm going to be an entrepreneur because I'm going to get rich. And I've realized, it's so much harder to get rich and quickly, because you make a lot of, you're learning as an entrepreneur, you're in discovery, especially the first early years, because I didn't have a degree in entrepreneurship. And so I went to community college and I got my associates, and then I'm like, I'm just going to be my own business guy. And I had a check cashing booth in North City, St. Louis, Missouri, right? Bulletproof glass. I had my best friends with me at all times, Mr. Smith and Mr. Wesson, right? It was a rough gig, but I loved it because I was in control. I knew, and I was 21, so I was young, and I knew that this path was a path that I could scale and grow, and rise above and be able to take care of the people who I loved and things like that. I'm curious because we live in a time where there's a lot of tension in our society, and there's all kinds of tensions. Of course, there's tensions because we're trying to move through this pandemic. There's political tensions, there's religious tensions, there's ethnic tensions and things like that.
Definitely.
When I was growing up, and so this is the 90s, I didn't, even though my parents were immigrants, and I didn't look at the world, like at least my entrepreneurial world, as I have less opportunity because of my skin color being, whatever you want to call it, olive, off-white, brown, whatever it's, it depends on the time of the year, and certainly genetics. My brother's a whole lot darker than I am, but we're the same, whatever it looks like. But the point is that I didn't have a self-limiting belief that, because of a label, which was placed on me by society, that I couldn't achieve whatever it is I hope to achieve based on, of course, my, traits, skills, abilities, context conversion, right? A little bit of luck.
Yep.
How did you view it growing up and moving into entrepreneurship today?
I would say that when I was younger, I recognized that there was a difference in races and, the way they treated each other and things of that nature. But I was very lucky when I was younger to not have to worry about it that much. I just knew this. I just knew that there were certain people who you don't, there are certain codes of people who you just don't get on their bad side. And I just kept it at that. But I still felt like I already told you, I felt like I could make change I could change my life to make it what I wanted it to be. And I didn't see race or anything like that being able to change it. What I really started to learn though, as I got older, was that there are some difficulties that come up from race and ethnicity, religion, things of that nature. And so what I would say is I do recognize that there are some opportunities that are missed just due to who you are. But there's also some opportunities that are gained just due to who you are. And so to the people listening, that what you guys are, if you're imagining that life is harder for you because of X, Y, or Z, probably right. But it's that same way for anybody who is like you. And just saying that you have a difficulty does not change your situation. If you want your situation changed, it's going to be you changing it. And relying on the one day where you will be pale and male is not exactly a great growth strategy for you.
Come on.
So what you have to do is just recognize who you are. Just take a look out there. If there are some difficulties in whatever industry you're in, then find those differences, find those difficulties, and plan for ways around it. And it's really just it comes down to you. You've got to sit down and make the plans. You've got to stand up and make the walk. You got to pick up the phone and make the calls. And it's just like that for everybody. There might be some difficulties that are different here than there, but at the end of the day, if you don't have the drive to get there, then you won't be getting there.
Well said. It reminds me of, and I think I might have mentioned this on another episode, Avis. They had a slogan, we're number 2, we try harder.
We're number 2, we try harder.
And I wonder, sometimes like I tried harder, right? Because maybe I didn't have equal opportunity, right? We didn't have money, so we didn't have, certain opportunities. I didn't have a college opportunity and things like that, right? Whatever it might look like. Immigrant parents, you name it, right? You go down this. But I wonder if that further, and it's hard to remember every aspect of coming out, right? But I do remember trying just as hard as I could, because I was determined to make it work no matter what the obstacle was, no matter, even in, a 9/11 time where, my last name was like synonymous with, okay, are you part of a terrorist organization, right? Things like that. Like none of that deterred me from keep moving forward. In fact, the same year I launched, I expanded my business by 5 times.
Wow.
And it was really, it had to do with location, right? I went from one part of town to another, which had a ton more exposure, and I multiplied the business, right? So it was really the decisions I was making. Like I could have made the decision, like I'm gonna lay low for a few years because of all this tension that we're having right now. And so, but I didn't make that decision. I made the decision to keep moving forward, keep pressing on.
Yeah.
And as an entrepreneur, I believe that I'm not going to say entrepreneurship is colorblind, because I think that would be certainly naive.
Right.
But I would say entrepreneurship has unlimited possibilities, no matter where you come from, no matter who you are, no matter what language you speak, no matter where you were born. It's limitless opportunities. And it's not just because we're saying that, because it's been proven. It fleshes itself out because we see those who have made it, if you will, right? Successful, and have started with very little means, or have started with disenfranchisement or marginalization.
Yep.
And through, as you said, with the drive and quote unquote the luck or whatever you might want to call it. Even Jeff Bezos says, hey, you know what? I feel like I won the lottery with Amazon. Right? Because he recognizes that even that pinnacle of success requires some level of of luck, if you will, right? Because, and he even says that one day Amazon will die, and that's a big statement from
what might be the largest company in the world,
right?
Yeah,
and so, but that's a sobering statement. But what I think it also does is it keeps him on his toes. It keeps him thinking forward and what's next, like you. So as you move into this new space of entrepreneurship, certainly you face trials.
Definitely.
Let's talk about some of that.
Let's get into it.
Yeah.
I'll probably say the first thing that people need to know is just because you're an entrepreneur, that doesn't mean that you've made it. When I was younger, I thought that being an entrepreneur was synonymous to making it. I felt like, and I bring up the founder of the software consulting company that hired me for my first gig. He looked tired. His name was Aslam Chigani. He looked tired, and he had some rough bits to his life, but I felt like he was successful in my eyes. But there was, so just emulating him was some amount of effort, and then actually making it beyond what he is or was is an entire other effort. And so I'm in the stage right now where I'm trying to get to a point to where I would say that what I'm doing is sustainable and I can step away from it. At the point it is today, those things are not quite there. And so I'm in that beginning entrepreneurship phase where you're doing it and you're just doing it because you know that this is the direction you want to go in. It doesn't exactly make sense for you to be doing it. I think that some entrepreneurs, not every entrepreneur, but some entrepreneurs go through this phase where you're doing it because you want to do it, not exactly because it makes sense. When I left my 9 to 5, it made no sense. I'd been looking for 7 years to figure out exactly how I would become a full-time entrepreneur. I started a business. It didn't quite go well. I started creating a product to fix some issues with the business while also feeding my need to have a product of my own. And that still was floundering. That wasn't working. There's been plenty of trials. But what I'm trying to say here is it's difficult. You got to find a way to get going and then figure out how exactly it all makes sense later. Some people have it figured out on day one. Business is profitable day one. That's not the way my business is.
And that's not the way a lot of businesses are. I mean, I can tell you that from owning an accounting and advisory firm, that many, if not most, are struggling initially 1, 2, 3, 5 years sometimes, right? Yep. And so, you've got to have that deep tenacity to press on. Do you ever feel as though there's times when you are discouraged or when you doubt, you think, well, shoot, I should have kept that 9 to 5?
All the time.
Yeah.
All the time. There are the days where I do some good work and a client comes through with a nice check for the work that I've rendered, and those are good days.
Yeah.
But on most days, I'm trying to figure out how to make the ends meet. I'm trying to figure out, I used to pay for that using my 9 to 5, and now there's no way for that to get paid now. I need to figure something out. And that's the majority of the days. So there are tons of times when I get discouraged, tons of times when I feel like, what am I doing here? Tons of times when I feel like I was an idiot for leaving the 9 to 5, especially during a wild time like during the COVID pandemic. People are out here trying to figure out how to feed themselves, and I'm intentionally walking away from the money. I'm walking away from the bag that's keeping me well fed. So there's so many times when I feel like I made the wrong move. But
what pulls you through?
I think that what pulled me through is knowing that if I had never made the move, I would always regret it. So I had to make a decision over which life was the worst life. The life where I tried, failed, possibly, or the life where I never tried, technically never failed, but always felt like I should have done more. I could have done more. I could be more. I felt like that was the true death. Like if I went out there and I tried and I failed, I died on that battlefield. Shoot, I died. But what I felt like would have been worse was to never try, never fail, but to always feel like I was dead already. Dead on the inside already. I was never big enough, strong enough, bold enough to take a chance, to make the decision. And so I felt like that soft death, I feel like people are there's no such thing as sort of equilibrium or stasis. Everything's either growing and evolving and multiplying, or it's dying or declining. And I felt like the decision I made there was the life or death decision. Am I going to make the decision that keeps me on the incline, or am I going to make the decision that makes me feel like I'm always on the decline? And so that made it white and black to me. I needed to do this because I need to be the type of person so that whether I'm failed and I'm 7 years old telling my grandkids this, or, I was successful and I'm telling my son about it, I tried it. I went out there. I did it. And it showed up in this way. This was the result, but I would not be okay with being 7 years old and saying I could have been. People told me how smart I was. I read tons of books. I listened to almost every episode of DailyVee, and nothing. I just decided I wasn't going to try it. I never got it in me to go for it. I feel like that would have been a soft and long death. I was like, okay, just kill me now. If that's what I have to look forward to, I might as well try it right now. Just go ahead and I'd rather leak out on the street than die slowly over the course of 30 years.
You're taking a shot.
Taking a shot.
It reminds me of if you remember the movie Braveheart, the saying.
Didn't see the movie, but I know what you're talking about.
All men die, few really ever live. And this is what you're talking about. Yeah. I could die, but am I really living? And your picture of living is taking the kind of risks that will move you forward in life. Yeah. And I think it might have been Warren Buffett that said, if you live your whole life without failing, you're just not trying hard enough. Mm-hmm. And so when you talk about failing, so I look at failure as it's not final, it's feedback. I think some of our audience would have heard this on other episodes. It's only final when you give up.
Yeah.
And so this is the model really for entrepreneurship, because if you think you're going to start a business and you're not going to have problems, you're not going to have setbacks, you're not going to have failure, well, you're not going to have a realistic view of what is required of you. And I think part of the beauty is those war wounds. Because I look back and probably the first 5 to 10 years, man, we're just battle scars. I mean, talking about not having money for payroll or having inventory issues or customers unhappy or just trying to get things right, not being able to make rent, or the back of the storefronts flooded and the landlord's not going to fix it until you pay him. I mean, these are real issues. And I look back and I'm like, would I have it any other way? The answer is definitive no. I mean, that's the color of the story.
Nice.
Because our stories should have color. They should have adversity. And because those are the stories people want to hear, because those are the stories of reality. In fact, I had one of my classmates when I was working on my PhD was starting a business. And he said, hey, Nate, I would love to talk to you about business. He said, my father-in-law he's self-employed. He's got his own business. He said he knocked it out of the park his first try. But he's not somebody I can really talk with. You started half a dozen businesses and half of them just went to the toilet. And he's like, that's what I want to hear. I want to talk to people that have been in the trenches, that it didn't work out. What did you do? Because I know I'm going to face challenges in my business, and I want to know, what did you do? And so as you're moving forward, right? This is that character building business of what you're doing right now. And it's such a beautiful thing to hear it, because I think the transparency is important, that you will face challenges along the way. And the question isn't, will I face challenges? Is how do I adapt and overcome and deal with adversity? And you being a person of faith, I'd love to hear, how that ties into this journey of yours.
I would say that the way it ties in is really, just to keep it simple, I don't think anything is possible without faith. Now, whether you are a person who's in the congregation every Sunday, or you're the person, with a Bible, with an old dingy Bible where you can only really read one page, or you're the person who's just they believe, they call this, there are a lot of people who say I'm spiritual. No, it doesn't matter where you are on that spectrum, full blown atheism even. If you do not have faith that it will work, then it will most definitely not work. There's the famous saying from Henry Ford: whether you believe you can or you believe you can't, you're right.
Yeah.
So if there's the simplest tie-in is that there is no growth without faith. You have to have faith. You have to have enough faith in you to create a plan on how to improve your life. You have to have even more faith to be able to get up and act on that plan, even though it doesn't seem like it's going to work out. And there's even more faith required to take the sacrifices of that time and say, I'm going to extend this time by 10. I'm going to do this not for 5 years and not for 3 years. I'm going to do this for 10 years. It's just, there's an amount of faith that is required on anyone's part. And if you don't make the decision, you don't get the results.
Indeed. In fact, it reminds me of a leadership scholar who was speaking about vision. And he said, vision by definition is imagination. And he said, which requires by definition requires an act of faith to make real. I mean, literally, because it doesn't exist yet. So it requires an act of faith to move toward it.
Yep.
Because it's not materialized. And I love how you describe it. And so, for the listener who is contemplating, well, I'm not sure this is going to work out. It would remind me of my son, who is an aspiring entrepreneur. He's always, ever since he was 7, he's always had these ideas. And so recently he said, Dad, I got this idea, but I just don't think it's going to work. And my response is, well, there's your answer.
It's just not going to work.
There's your answer. And he's like, well, what do you mean? I said, because he wants me to affirm him. Like, right. Look, it's got to be internal. You've got to believe in it. It's your baby. If you don't believe in it, nothing I could say. Because when things don't go right, you're going to come back to me and be like, hey, can I get another pep talk? I'm like, no. Nope. You've got to believe. If you don't believe it, nobody else will. That's the idea of vision and leadership. Because leadership involves your belief in the vision to start moving forward to it. And belief, it's been said, a root of belief is to be living. So when you say you believe something, you're actually living it. So if you say I believe something, you're not living it, you don't believe it.
You don't really believe it.
You don't really believe it.
I like that.
And so people are looking toward you to see, are you living out your vision? Because if you're not living it out, I'm not going in your direction because you're a poser.
Exactly.
But if you're living it out, okay, all right. If I buy into your vision, if I believe, I share your purpose, I might just walk alongside of you. And I think that's the heart of business is, I think it was Shaq who said, and Shaquille O'Neal is actually a great
successful
businessman.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very successful business.
He is. Yeah. He's actually a PhD himself. He's got a doctorate. And he's very humble about it. But he talks about business, and he said, he was, and this is where mentorship comes in. I'm so thrilled that you that you approach each day with analyzing who, you might walk alongside of that's been down that road. And I think that's what mentorship is. It's different than coaching. Mentorship is the person who has actually achieved what you hope to achieve.
Right.
A coach isn't necessarily an achiever. Like, Phil Knight, he didn't achieve what Michael Jordan did. But he certainly could coach him, right? There's a difference between a coach and a mentor.
Yes.
And so Shaq was talking about one of his mentors, and he said that he began to understand that when he made his business about helping people, when people were the center of his business model, that he was invested in improving the human condition, he said that began to double and quadruple his business and his results. And so the reason behind that is back to leadership, sharing purpose. If your purpose is to help someone illuminate an opportunity, eliminate an issue, right? I believe that leadership involves illumination and elimination, right? So there's another one for you.
I like it.
So this is where we are invested in the people who have challenges. And we say, look, I have a way to help you overcome this obstacle through my talents, my skills, my abilities, whatever it is my offering is. And I want to walk alongside of you to help you. You go from adversarial to an ally. That's the difference between, I think, selling and serving, right? I mean, sure, you can call it selling, but really serving in such a way that, look, all I want to do is I want to make sure that those who have a need, that need has been satisfied. And of course, there's an exchange, right?
Of course.
Yeah. And the exchange is, I got needs too.
Right.
Right?
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. I got needs too. And so as we move forward as entrepreneurs, to focus less on, well, I got to get paid. Of course you have to get paid. Of course money is a fuel and a vehicle is necessary, but focus first on where is the need that needs to be satisfied. And that's where I tell my niece, because my niece will be like, I want to be rich. I'm like, well, okay, that's fine, but that's a byproduct.
Yep.
That's a byproduct. What do you offer? What do you bring to the table? And see the wheels start turning. Well, I don't know. Well, you better figure that one out first.
Exactly.
Because you think you're just going to be a YouTube influencer, right? Ride the bandwagon of that stuff.
It's not going to happen.
No, it's not. I mean, the likelihood of that's very nil. But where have you been gifted? Where are your strengths? Where are your talents? Where's your heart? Where's your passion to serve? And then how do you monetize that, right? Yep. How do you help people achieve their goals so that you can then in turn be remunerated, which is to say there's a financial exchange.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast this morning, the Hip Hop Preacher, and he was speaking on entrepreneurship with the founder of the Breakfast Club, very well known breakfast spot. They were talking about how entrepreneurship is really nothing but the filling of a void. Entrepreneurship is nothing but the filling of a void, and the void is some need or some want in the market, whether people know about it or don't. If you are filling a need that the market needs, then you're an entrepreneur. And without that, you cannot be an entrepreneur. If you say, I have a skill in braiding USB cables together, you probably don't. There isn't a need that I can think of that the market has for that. And unless you can prove that the market has that need, you're not an entrepreneur.
Right.
You need to have some need that is actually existent in the market. And with that, you can then go somewhere.
Yeah. I've said it like this. So I've distilled success in 5 words or less: entrepreneurial, or really any type of leadership role. And so the 5 words are this: solve relevant problems with excellence. If you can do that consistently, you're not going to go hungry, because we're in the problem solving business, but the problems have to be relevant. That's what we're talking about, right?
Yep.
As it was famously said, if Henry Ford asked his customers what they wanted more of, they would say faster horses, right?
Yep.
But he knew that there was relevance somewhere else. And so the problems have to be relevant. In other words, people have to to hear it, understand it, and it has to move them, right? It has to have an action piece, right? And of course, you have to be a problem solver. But then there's the excellence piece, right? Because you could be mediocre at solving relevant problems. You won't be in business very long, especially in this current context where there's a lot of accountability in Google reviews and whatever else, right? Instantaneously. And so you've got to have excellence, and not just excellence in solving their problems, but solving your own problems too. Let's talk about just operation problems, HR problems, finance problems, marketing problems, things like that, right? These are all part of the equation of excellence. And how do you do it? You continue to move forward and continue to learn and adapt and take your mistakes, right? Add them to your playbook to grow and improve. And I love that that's your heart.
100%.
Because I believe that that's going to help catapult you further and further and further. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation today, because when we have this conversation in 24 to 36 to 48 to 60 months from now, and you're in a different season, and we can reflect back at the time of the establishment and the foundation, we can look back and I think be thankful.
Definitely.
For those war wounds that you've had along the way.
Most definitely. I look forward to that point. I look forward to that point for sure.
Yeah, I bet you do. And I'm looking forward to walking alongside of you with it.
Awesome. I feel the same.
How can people find you?
So people can find me. You can find me on LinkedIn. That's Lamar Woods. So LinkedIn/IN/Lamar V Woods. That's where I am in the majority of the time. You can also check out some of the videos I have on entrepreneurship and on the mistakes I've made in entrepreneurship on my YouTube channel. You can just search Lamar Woods on YouTube and you can find me there. Beyond that, that's really it. I focus on those two channels. And so if you want to connect with me, find me there or reach out to me through one of my websites. You can go to woodsandtech.com for my software consulting business. Or if you're interested in the addiction recovery work that I'm doing, you can head on over to soheart.app and just fill out the contact box and we can get a conversation going.
Love it. Love you, brother.
Thank you.
So excited for each step of your journey. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you.
Well, my friend, we did it. I'm so honored you were able to join me on this episode of A Call to Leadership. Now, this might not be for everyone. You really have to be in a certain place in order to take the kind of steps to level up your leadership. And for those of you who feel like you're ready for something like this, you can go to our website, greatsummit.com. I'll make sure that's in the show notes. But here's the cool thing that we have. We've got a masterclass. We have all different kinds of events. We even have our leadership club where you can meet other people just like you. You and I will get to spend some time together and really focus on aiming for greatness.